There are players in fantasy football that we just refuse to hit that draft button on. We don't want any part of them on our rosters, and I get that. So today I'm going to be giving you guys 5 players that fit that category for me. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Starting off here with probably the hottest take that I have, and that is Achane. He is my running back 16 rather, but this is a guy that's going at the late second, early third round turn as the 7th running back off the board. To me, he's running back 15 or 16 in my rankings, so I think he's going incredibly too high. I would value this guy as a late 4th round selection in my drafts in 12-team leagues, of course. But he is a questionable frame. He's going to be splitting the backfield carries with Raheem Mostert. And if it isn't a 50-50 split, let's say it's a 60-40 split in the favor of Achane, is that going to lead to enough fantasy production to be worth a 3rd round selection? Now, I know he only needs 2 or 3 carries a week to have this explosive year and be a top 10 fantasy running back. But that's banking a lot of your season on 2 or 3 touches each and every game for him to be explosive. Again, I know Achane is an incredible player. He's going to have a great season, but is it going to be great enough for a early 3rd round selection? That is where my gripe comes in, and that's why I cannot draft Achane in the 3rd round. For Stefon Diggs at the wide receiver position, he is currently going in the middle of the 3rd round, and believe it or not, he's actually rising up draft boards, and he's now the wide receiver 20 in fantasy drafts. And of course, I have him as my wide receiver 23 to 25 in that tier. But to me, going in the 3rd round is incredibly too high, especially when you factor in, yes, this guy's been amazing in Buffalo for years. He was amazing in Minnesota for years. But he's no longer the alpha number 1 wide receiver in his offense. He's no longer the clear-cut number 1 go-to guy in his offense. He now has Nico Collins, who had a breakout year next to him, Tank Dell, who's returning from injury. You have a receiving running back now in the mix in Joe Mixon, and then you have a great safety blanket tight end in Dalton Schultz. There's only one ball to go around, and there's a ton of mouths to feed. So, again, I know Stefon Diggs is going to produce, but is he going to produce at a 3rd round level? That's my gripe with a guy like Diggs and Achane. I think you're better off going with a different route, a safer option at receiver that gives you a safer floor and, of course, maybe even a higher upside. For Davante Adams, I've been watching the wide receiver documentary on Netflix, and it's starting to sway my opinion, man. I want to draft Davante Adams now because of the person that he is. And again, TV can do that to you. But right now he's going in the middle of the 2nd round, of course, at the 204 as the wide receiver 11 off the board. To me, he's in that range from wide receiver 11 to 15. I love the player. He's one of the most talented receivers we've had in the last decade or so of football, but he's still in the same situation as last year. Subpar quarterback situation. This is an offense that has other great options like Jacoby Myers and 2 great tight end options that will get the ball this year. And it is the same situation with Achane and Diggs. Davante is going to produce. It's Davante Adams, right? But is he going to be worth your 2nd round selection? That is what I can't wrap my head around. I would rather go with any receiver in that 2nd round. Garrett Wilson, right? A.J. Brown, of course, Puka Nacua, even maybe a Marvin Harrison could have an argument over Davante Adams. You have a lot of different options in that 2nd round at the wide receiver position that are going to give you safer production on a week in, week out basis. Again, Davante Adams, tremendous player. I'm just worried about his quarterback situation, man. I don't want to bank my season on Gardner Minshew. I really don't. Malik Nabers, what if I told you that this is actually, he would be, I'll say this, on any other year, he would be the highest rated rookie in fantasy drafts in the preseason polls ever. Because he is, outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. This is a guy, Malik Nabers, that is going as the at the 301 at the 2-3 turn as the 19th receiver off the boards. To me, again, incredibly too high. The earliest I would take Malik Nabers because of his situation there in New York is probably the wide receiver 30, right? At the late 4th round, the early 5th round on that turn. Again, I think all these guys in today's videos are just going a round or 2 early, and that could be the difference in how well your roster turns out after your drafts. But for Malik Nabers, subpar quarterback situation, Daniel Jones might have a couple good weeks here in the NFL season. Malik Nabers might have a couple good weeks, but I don't think he might have a couple splash weeks, is what I'm saying. But I don't know if he's going to be consistent enough and great enough throughout the entire season to be worth your third round selection. Again, this is a guy that is in an offense with a lot of other young, talented wide receivers that will need the ball this year. Jalen Hyatt, of course, Wan'Dale Robinson, who's highly underrated. Daniel Bellinger is a tight end, but of course, Brian Daboll seems to like Daniel Bellinger. Of course, Devin Singletary can get busy in the backfield in the receiving game as well. So Malik Nabers, great player. He's going to have a tremendous career, at least on paper, but this is a guy that needs a better quarterback and a better scheme around this quarterback. Until we see that, it kind of turns me off on the idea of drafting Malik Nabers. Talented guy. Again, dynasty leagues, go after him. For redraft, kind of stay away. And then the last one, I'm going to kind of group these two guys together. Just second round tight ends. I will gladly draft Laporta and Kelsey in the third or even fourth rounds. But getting a guy in the second round at a onesie position is just a strategy I've never liked here in fantasy football outside of the days where Gronkowski was killing it there in fantasy year in and year out for the Patriots. But to me, when you look at the most populated positions, they're the running back and the wide receiver spots, right? They get hit every play. They're probably the most fragile in your fantasy starting lineup. Let's go out there and get quality depth at the most populated positions. If your quarterback or tight end that you draft in the second round goes down, it puts your roster in a very risky spot where it's harder to come back from as far as getting some of that quality depth and another superstar level player at the running back or receiver positions. It's all about value. But again, the earliest that I would draft one of these guys is at the early third round on that turn. Let's say if you draft McCaffrey at the 101. And again, I'd rather wait here. If you really are dead set on taking one of these two tight ends, sure, take them in the third round. But if you don't, even if you want to pass on these guys entirely in the second or third round and continue to get quality depth at those most important positions, go after Trey McBride in the fifth round. Go after Andrews in the fifth round. These are guys that you could argue is in the same tier of tight end, Dalton Kincaid as well. And you can get them 2 rounds later than Kelsey or, of course, Laporta. So again, it's all about value in fantasy football. And I think some of these guys are just going a round or two too early, no pun intended. But here's a little graphic I made for you guys. Of course, we did this last week for the players that I would draft every single time if I could. Of course, you see the name, where they're going, my rank, and of course, just in general. But while you guys look at that, I do want to make a big announcement. I'm opening up a new channel, which you might already be seeing this on. It's going to have strictly my fantasy football content. Now, don't worry. I'm going to have this same content on both channels. But if you really just want the fantasy football side of me, that is going to be on the channel you're probably watching on now. But until next week, stay happy, stay healthy, get out of here.